Crooked cops, ex-convicts just trying to make it, and the people caught in the middle. We're not talking about the American legal system. This is Dragged Across Concrete. Dragged Across Concrete is a 2018 action drama written and directed by S. Craig Zahler. This is the same guy that made Brawl in Cell Block 99 and Bone Tomahawk. All of the music in the movie is original. It was written by Jeff Harriet and S. Craig Zahler and performed by the OJs. Seriously though, how awesome is that? The cast, as with most S. Craig Zahler movies, is unreal. You've got Mel Gibson, Vince Vaughn, Terry Kittles, Don Johnson, Jennifer Carpenter, Michael Jai White, Thomas Kretschmann, Udo Kier, and many more. So the premise is 2 cops have been suspended from the force. So out of a job, they decide that they're going to go after the criminals themselves and take the money that they feel they deserve. So as you guys know, when I talk about movies, I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. That being said, let's get to the good. Cinematography in this movie is just gorgeous. I'm a huge fan of Benji Bashki now. I wasn't too familiar with him before, but the way that he lights things, the way that he frames things, his motivated camera movements, everything, man, that this guy does is just top notch. And he really took it to another level in this movie. It might be a little too subtle for some people, but I really enjoyed the fact that this movie has an old school noir feel. It feels like a graphic novel, the way that it is lit. There's a certain language that they build in the movie. Everything is on sticks. Everything is set in frame. The only time the camera is moving is if the characters are moving, so it's always motivated. The dialogue, as always with Zahler, is amazing. There's a lot of clever stuff that's said, but there's also a lot of things that aren't said. There's certain looks that people give. It reminds me of Scorsese's The Irishman. It's that good. And just as with the dialogue, the characters in Zahler films are always really interesting, really nuanced, and really layered. They might not be good people, but you are invested in them and what they're doing. And he gives you a reason and usually a pretty fantastic introduction to these characters to really get you on board. The movie really subverts your expectations. Right away, you kind of don't like the cops. You look at them as the bad guys, and you look at some of the criminals as good guys. And I think that interesting dichotomy, that juxtaposition, is what gets you on board with this movie. From there, it kind of builds, and you see more layers to these characters to where you're kind of rooting for most of them. There's a pretty interesting conversation between Don Johnson and Mel Gibson that kind of delves into what it's like being a cop in the digital age and what you can and can't get away with, and what you should or should not be doing. And the thing is, the stuff that they're talking about is really deep-seated into these cops. It's into their way of life, and that speaks to the character building and the world building of this film. As always, Zahler's movies, there's so much character and world building, and he really takes his time in this one. But what's always important is the character, is the shot, is the story. The production design is awesome. Everything has a unique style to it. Each character has a different feel. Vince Vaughn's character, everything in his world is a little bit brighter and a little bit cleaner and nicer. And in Mel Gibson's, everything's a little dirtier, a little dingier, and a little more pessimistic. And that's all portrayed in the costume design, the set design. It's just really great production. The characters, their situations, the dynamic between them, their dialogue, everything gives the movie this vibrancy, this life to it. For me, this movie is if you took like Nicholas Winding Refn and Quentin Tarantino and Steven Soderbergh and Christopher McQuarrie, you put it all into a blender and you make something that is just tasty and delicious. This is that movie. Now, I'm not saying that he's copying what they're doing. I'm just saying each of those filmmakers has certain things that they're really good at that I enjoy. And the thing about Zahler's movies, especially this one, is he finds a great balance between all of them. You're never left wanting. When you finish one of his movies, especially this one, you don't say, man, that was really cool, but I wish they did this. And while most of the characters do have some sort of a moral compass, there are a few rogue elements that are just cold and calculating and really, really just gangster as hell. They're really bad people and you want to see them go down. But along the way, he's gonna make you squirm and see them do things where you're just like, Jesus, man, I really hope these guys get it. All the violence is really, really hardcore. It's really beautiful and it's done practically, which always makes things better. One thing that I enjoy about Zahler's writing about his characters is the fact that he can write men and women equally as well. They can be both smart, clever, strong. There's no gap. There's no misrepresentation of them. A lot of criticisms that you see towards certain filmmakers these days is that they're not good at writing women. They're not good at certain facets of personalities, you know, the nuances of the genders, and he really nails it. The character building and world building are solid, but the tension building in this movie is just phenomenal, man. It just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, and it keeps going on up. There is a nice ebb and flow to it, you know, every once in a while you do get a chance to breathe, but most of the movie it has you by the throat and it doesn't let you go. Especially when it comes to the robbery scenes, the acts of violence, anything that has, you know, a character's life at stake, man, there's so much tension. And more often than not, something does go really bad. You don't get a release from that tension, you just kind of get shocked and you're kind of stuck in there. The outcomes in this movie, like most of Zoller's movie, are satisfying but realistic. You know, you don't always get what you want, and sometimes something happens you didn't realize you wanted, but when it does, it comes off really genuine, and you're kind of glad that that character ended in this certain way, whether it was a good way or a bad way. Basically, all of the urges, all of the things that you feel, you know, during the movie that you want to happen to characters, whether they be a good thing or a bad thing, always come to fruition, and it's really satisfying. There is a small part in this movie that is just one of my favorites that I've seen in a long time when it comes to a good emotional core, just a lot of heart. The way that it ends isn't going to be necessarily the way that you want to see it end. That's one of the things that really bothers me about the movie. Not the fact that, you know, this certain thing happened with this person, but I mean, it speaks to how the world is. The world is not easy. The world is hard. The world doesn't care about if you're a good person or not. As a matter of fact, if you are a good person, you tend to get on the regular. You're going to have a much harder life if you have warmth and heart and integrity and you try to do the right thing. Everybody else who's doing the wrong stuff and just doing what they have to get ahead, their life's going to be easier. It is what it is. And this character and their arc really speaks to that. The last thing I want to talk about is the music. Zoller doesn't usually use music in his films, and when he does, it's very subtle and it's quiet. But in this movie, there are a few times where it's kind of in your face, but all the music complements what's happening on the screen, and that's because Jeff Harriet and S. Craig Zoller wrote these songs specifically for the movie, and the freaking OJs performed all of the music. I think that is just unreal. With all that good out of the way, let's talk about the bad. This is a minor annoyance, this is a minor grievance, but I have to address it because it happens a lot in movies, all right? When people play video games, especially on the PlayStation, right, there's a light on the front of the controller. That light should be on. If that light is off, then you know those controllers aren't working and they're not actually playing a game. Now, I'm not saying all actors, when they're on screen, should be playing a game, but at least turn the console on, baby. Today's audiences have a short attention span. They don't seem to have time for a good character-driven, lengthy film. This movie's 2.5 hours long, but it feels like a breezy hour and a half because it's done so well. And, you know, these scenes get time to breathe, but some people are going to get frustrated. They're going to get bored. Now, that's those people's problems because they're morons, but it is what it is. There are a few scenes of violence and robberies and things of that nature in this film, but there is this one marquee robbery that happens, and what they show of it is fantastic. It's very interesting, and it's unique to any robbery I've ever seen in a film. It's very uniquely done, but they don't show the whole robbery. I wish they had showed more of the robbery to show you what happened and what went down. Now, when they do reveal what happened, it's later on, and it is pretty shocking, but I still would have liked to have seen it. Some people might not like the ending. You know, there's this big climax and then it kind of winds down, and the ending is very subtle and it's almost a commentary on what happened in the film. One, you're probably going to lose some people with that ending because they're not going to understand it. Two, some people are going to wish that it just ended on that really, you know, bombastic high note. For me, I really enjoyed the ending, but for some people, it's just not going to be their bag. Now, I've heard this from a couple of my friends who have seen the movie. They weren't quite sure about the tone of it. You know, some felt it was a little too funny for such a serious movie, and some felt that it was the other way, that maybe there were some times where it was too serious for such a funny movie. For me, it strikes a good balance. But in summary, this is a fantastic crime caper. This is one of the most realistic, one of the most nuanced portrayals of what it might be like if cops decided to go dirty, or if criminals are just trying to make it, you know, and it goes into different types of criminals and what one finds acceptable, you know, one may not. The violence, the gore, the really crazy situations that they get into, all of this stuff is just done so brilliantly, and it's executed over a nice lengthy film that gives you time to explore it and it gives you time to breathe. This is a classic. This is one of the best crime movies I have ever seen, period. So with all that being said, what is my score? Drum roll, please. 9 out of 10.